Tell me about the moment you knew not just what to do, but how to do it successfully. Not the strategy, but shifting the actual operating reality. Across Asia, companies are setting targets high and planning transformation. But knowing what you need to do and successfully doing it are two completely different things. So join us as we talk to decision makers who made a call that changed how the company operates and to operators who delivered it on the ground. The question we ask, not what should companies do differently, but what did it actually take to do it? Welcome to The Big Shift.
DBS has been doing their transformation and AI strategy since early as 2014. But in 2018 was when they really invested in doing more advanced analytics. And the strategy is to really scale it and make everyone embedded in every part of the business. So I was part of that. And I think that was one of the big shifts that I've really been a part of. I think DBS now is the gold standard for driving AI-led transformation. From not having any roadmap to copy, right? So we didn't have anything at the start.
No blueprints.
No blueprints, no playbooks, we were just building the analytics platform at that time. And we're trying to say that, okay, DBS is going to be a startup company with several mini startups in the bank. Harvard Business wrote about it, that after 5 years, the incremental value coming out of AI use cases or AI adoption is 370 million, right? That was, I think, one of the
Tremendous,
big shift that we have done.
Can I ask, going back to the beginning of that, without a blueprint, without a roadmap, without maybe even much of a model to go after, how did you decide where to get started? Because you could technically start in a variety of areas. Correct. How did you decide the starting point?
To make this a success, we need to show value from the start. So from the very start, that's why we call ourselves the analytics translator. Our core job is actually to go to the business and find meaningful, valuable use cases that we can work on so that we can show value from the start, even though we're still building the foundation. That's how we started, really. So as the more technical team is building the infrastructure, the applications that will enable the whole strategy from a technical perspective, there's us who went to the business and really sat down with them and say, what are your core problems right now? What is your top of mind? And what keeps you awake at night? And how are you doing things right now? And then from there, we extract how can we translate that problem into something that AI can actually solve?
What would happen without such a translator, you think? Hypothetical, right? But I think we see all around us transformation also failing on that end. So maybe there's an indication here.
If you're focused on just improving or taking the most advanced technique and applying it, right? But without thinking or bridging the business problem, there's a term that McKinsey coined, it's pilot purgatory. A lot of you end up with many pilots, but you're not able to scale because you're not solving the right problem. So when you're not solving the right problem, that means that you don't have the right support from the business. And when you're not solving the right problem, that means whatever you're working on is easy to take for granted.
Or dismiss.
Because
it's easy to say no. It's always easier to say no than to say yes for an organization. In different departments, whether it be finance or legal, or somebody will find a reason to kill it.
And you have to remember, they are the domain expert. It's on the analytics team to actually prove their worth. And that what you're actually bringing to the table is something worth looking at. So if you're not aligning with what's important to the business, if you're not aligning with where they would actually put their money on, it will be difficult to drive change.
So we've added to your technical and data expertise, we've added psychology, behavioral science, and now the business
Translation,
acumen
yes,
also
business acumen.
to be able to identify where the
Yes.
low-hanging fruits are.
Correct.
Yeah.
And because I would say the analytics translator is able to bridge that, right? Is able to make sure that this kind of alignment is happening as things are being built.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they're like your relationship managers, right? So while
But internally. Yes.
Because you have to remember, we are at the start, right? Everything is experimental. Everything is, let's try it out. And the thing is, if you are purely doing that as, let's try it out, and then you say, okay, I'll work on this, and then you go away for 3 months, and then you come back without anything, do you think the business would actually move, right? So while things are brewing, someone has to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying bring them for coffee, etc. That's part of the job, yes, of course. What I mean is they need to know that things are happening. Although they're not seeing it yet, but they are aware things are moving. These are decisions that are happening, and they are also involved in the decision. I remember recently I did some mentorship stint, and someone in the group was saying, so transformation is just looking for use cases to apply AI? And I chuckled inside because I was like, totally no. I think AI use cases would be what, 10-20% of the work?
Yes.
But the huge part of the work is actually organization. Right?
Yeah.
It's really about how do you make sure that people who's impacted will find their place and their voice in this whole initiative. How do you also make sure that you're actually getting value of what you're doing? Because this kind of AI initiative, it tends to become more of like a project. You're the next shiniest toy and you want to play with it. But actually, when it becomes very strategic, then you need to start showing value. The economics discussion starts coming up, right? So a lot of these things, and just finding a use case is really 20% of the work. I truly believe 70% is about people. Apart from having a good grounding of your business domain knowledge, you need to be able to influence even without authority. It's easy, and I say that because it's easier. I think it's easier to influence if you have a title. You're a C of this or a head of this, but there's only few people who can have that title. But it shouldn't stop someone like me or you or anyone in the organization to take on this role. But you need to be able to, influence even without authority. That means you should be able to communicate well, right? You need to have a good problem-solving skills, right? And I think you need to be able to build meaningful relationships. I think that to me would be a success factor for someone to drive transformation. You need to be able to read people's behavior. I think, because it's very important. And I think that's really it's a communications thing, right? You need to be able to read them, especially if you're facilitating a huge group and everyone have their own ulterior motives, everyone have their own goals, KPIs, and you're talking about change, right? So, but you need to be able to read the room.
What makes this so scary? Because it seems to be scary no matter what the topic is, right? We're talking about AI now, which is for different reasons seems scary by some people. But 10, 20 years ago, there were other changes, other transformations, either on the technology or even on the non-technology side. Yes. But there, like you said, there's emotions, there's almost a human aversion to that.
Yeah.
What does that mean in a corporate context? Why do you think that is, and what's the behavior that you see?
I think generally people are not accepting of change. There are people who are open to change, but I think largely people are more averse to change, right? Because change means something has to move, or change also means you need to be uncomfortable especially at the start, right? So not everyone is really open to that.
Yeah.
So I think and because of that, there's a lot of emotions that will surface because we're human, right? We're dealing with humans, right? If it's robots, then there's no emotions.
problem.
No problem. But everyone interprets change differently. And then communication itself. There are different languages, there are different ways people react on certain things. Even myself, right? I'd like to think I'm more open to change. But if, for example, certain things that I feel will threaten something core to me, I think I would also be different or react different.
And how do you deal with that as someone whose goal is to make the transformation a success?
You listen more, I think. Yeah, I listen more to people, and when I see that there's resistance, then you dig deeper on what is the resistance about, right? I think one thing that I personally that I use, not everyone has this kind of, I would say, style or technique, right? But the way I work with change or transformation is that I'm here to help. I'm not here to make things difficult for you, right? Because otherwise, I'm not going to make that effort anyway, right? So I'm here to help you. So if there's any concern, you talk to me openly.
Yeah.
And I think also, I'd like to think that my authenticity is also coming across. I think that's part of my personal brand, right? I'm very authentic. I mean what I say, and I walk the talk. So if I say something, a lot of the times, that's really what it is, right? And I think people see through that. So that helps.
It does require someone at senior level, ideally the most senior person, to be the person to say this is non-negotiable, though, right? Which is not so that you don't have to say it. You can be the person that says, I will help make it. Someone needs to say this is not an option.
Yes.
We're going to go through with it.
I think that's a very good thing to add. Any transformation work, one key success factor is you need to find the true sponsor in the organization, and hopefully that sponsor has good influential enough. And when I say influential enough, it's not just about the title. That person has enough gravity to get people to follow, work with, or believe what he's saying. Because for me, if I have someone like that, it's easier to borrow that influence and then bring it down to, because I work with on the ground, right? Actually from top to bottom. But if I have a sponsor like that, then it's easier to borrow and bring the influence down, right? So I think that's one trick.
Yes, borrowed influence without authority means there has to be a leader that has enough influence that you can borrow from.
Yes. And even in my current discussions, right, when one very important thing that I usually ask is, who is the sponsor of this? Or not directly saying who's sponsoring this, but who is driving this at the top level? Because that's an indication for me that they're serious about the AI transformation that they're doing. Because if it's a middle management who's really driving it, I'm not saying there's something wrong. It's good, someone is driving, but is that enough influence to really move the whole organization?
You can expect resistance, always, right?
Yes, there's always resistance. But if the sponsor has enough people rallying behind that person, right? It's easier to influence other people. Yeah.
With a lot of shiny new toys out there that you could potentially say, oh, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do a chatbot? Or why don't we, right? How do you pick or maybe you can actually share, which area did you find that you said, this is where our early wins were coming from?
You should start with.
Rather than the shiny thing or the thing that looks easy but is probably really hard, right?
Yeah.
So do you have some insights?
Yeah. That was also when we were starting, this is what the business would say. Hey, I heard you're doing AI or you're doing machine learning. I want to do AI ML and then that's the conversation. But then part of my job is to actually steer that conversation into something meaningful. What do you mean when you say this, right? And why do you think you need this kind of solution? So then you have to steer the conversation to what are you really trying to solve here, right? And your question on, okay, but even if you say, oh, I want to increase my revenue by 3x, that's still a very big problem to solve, right? So how do we choose the pocket to start with? Is which one would actually give significant impact but not as much effort?
Yeah.
That's really, there's really that kind of matrix that we put in place.
Excellent.
I'm not gonna go into the whole technical things that we really look at, but it really boils down to what is the effort involved and what is the impact.
And what did you find? What was an area where you found this is really relatively good impact, relatively low effort, a relatively fast win therefore?
One, actually, when we were starting, you quickly realize that a lot of things, the main issue is that there's no data, right? There's no data at all, right? And the first few things that we actually did and made a huge impact is just to make sure that data is captured. That's as simple as that. What do I mean by that? For example, we've been always sending EDMs. What's EDM? In those marketing emails, right? To basically take up your facility, etc. But we quickly realized that not a lot of this, the data happening from the time that this EDM was sent out until the customer actually picks it up, look at the email, where did they go from there. A lot of this information is not captured. But from the business side, it's not necessarily top of mind for them, right? What they could be looking at directly is, I just want to see the clicks, the open rate.
One data point.
One data point.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is there's a journey. And in between sending to customer opening it, there's a journey that they actually go through. And there are decision points that they have to actually go through to even say that, okay, I'm opening this, right?
That means you start small and then you find your path, or you means you have a clear roadmap from day one?
Yeah.
How does it work? Would you say you know from day one where you're going to end up, or is it a discovery process?
It's a discovery process. So I would say, for example, one of this transformation initiative that I led actually is the transformation of the FX business. One of the work that we've done there is building more experimentation around marketing, right? Because the question is, how do we capture the market? First of all, FX business is highly competitive and also saturated, right? So, and then you would see a lot of the fintech companies, they're really giving very competitive rates, etc. Right? So how do you differentiate, right? How do you capture or recapture the market? And what we have done is actually, instead of making a lot of assumptions, we just created a whole stream of experiments. So we have a lot of hypotheses, right? And this hypothesis, we tested everything through experimentation framework. And we basically said, okay, we don't know anything. We don't have prior knowledge to what the customer wants. So let's just experiment. And to do experimentation, like I said, you need to have a data to work with, right? So we tried to capture as much data as possible, which also means improving the digital channels, improving how we are extracting the data. But We grew the business quite significantly, I think, for a saturated
The FX business.
the
yeah.
FX business. We grew it well, and we were able to do that because we took on a mindset of experimentation. Let's just experiment and use data and try to just really watch what is the customer reacting to. So a lot of those we embedded all those capabilities for us to know our customers. If on how to choose what's the use case that I should we look at feasibility, like the effort that needs to do it and the impact. Now, if we see that there's something as basic as just capturing data, and we know that if we are able to capture the data, that actually does the 80% of the work,
Yeah.
we focus on that.
Yeah.
Because we capture the data, we prove that a specific use case is working, and at the same time, now because of that, I can do 100 other experiments, then I'll start with this.
Yeah. And you
Rather-
can track success, which otherwise you might not know whether what you're doing actually is making a
Yes,
difference.
yes.
When we spoke, you also had a very strong point on making change happen from the inside versus bringing in new teams, and saying they will be the
yes.
change makers here. What's your view on that?
Yes. And I come from a perspective that because I've seen how the change that, like I said, 70% of the work is actually about people or organizational, right? And I think when someone is already embedded in the organization, knows the culture, knows the people who can influence, understands the sentiment on the ground, and people already trust you, right? Then it's easier to talk about change, right? As opposed to someone who comes from the outside. There's, I would say, advantages to that, right? Because they don't come with a baggage, and they have a more, I would say, a fresh view of things, and that's okay. But what I'm saying is that I think should be at least 80-20
Yeah.
or 70-30.
You have different challenges. I think on the inside, you have people who are maybe also embedded in existing structures that might make it difficult for them.
Yes.
Where the outside person does not have that challenge, but the outside person that comes in, might they possibly rub people the wrong way? Maybe that's fine for the leadership,
Yes.
right? The change is not always
It doesn't always have,
comfortable, right?
yeah.
It doesn't always have to be.
Exactly. And I think the change maker should be homegrown. I call it
Yeah.
homegrown. It is more because there's people element, right? There's the people element to this, and communication, etc. It's easier to adapt,
Yes.
and it's easier to just say, hey, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
I know this is difficult, but we're on the same team here. We're playing for the same team. So why don't we just have a more open discussion
Yes.
here? And let's be honest with each other and just find a common ground
Yes.
rather than just try to kill each other.
Harder to reject, right? Or big organizations reject
Yes.
outsiders also. Yeah.
But the outsiders can come, but I guess their main goal first is just to, I would say, to give a fresh perspective. Rather than say, okay, I'm coming in and change everything. I think it will be a challenge to do this.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, I don't know, but personally, this is what
In
I
your
see.
experience, right?
And I think it's easier to get a bite
Yeah.
when it's like this. Yeah.
I want to talk about the future of banking in this exciting space that you're in. The banks that are working, financial institutions working on AI transformation right now, and they're looking at the basics, they're looking at the early wins, but there are clearly some that are ahead. What are they building right now? What are the areas that you need to look and say, oh, we do have to move a little bit fast now because there are others who are already doing things that we still find very risky, for example. Can you share an example for that?
The ones who are matured and has gone ahead, I think they're really far ahead already. They're thinking about autonomous agents at this point, right? I'm not saying that they're getting really near there, but they're probably considering that because they've already tested assisted, right? The co-pilots.
Yeah.
And likely they already have some governance in place, guardrails, all of that. So they're a bit more, I would say, they have more comfort level to up their game.
Yes.
But I'm seeing that maybe in the next, say, 3-5 years, there's more autonomous, I would say, multi-agents, autonomous agents. For example, Visa and MasterCard, they're not talking about intelligent commerce or agent-to-agent commerce, right? What does that exactly mean? Basically, there are agents who are given autonomy to make payments and transactions on behalf of the consumers, right? Imagine that. And in I imagine 3 to 5 years, there will be an agent-to-agent commerce parallel happening
Yeah.
with us.
You
right?
mentioned guardrails, right? Because they're key.
Yeah,
This is a high-risk area. Yeah.
High risk, exactly. What makes it difficult for a traditional industry like banks, right, to take on and to adopt, for example, this kind of technology like AI or even moving to the cloud, all of that? It's because there's so many regulations surrounding the transactions happening, right? So even for payments, you have to make sure that the transaction is authorized,
Yeah.
that you know who's actually transacting, right? So I would say that this agent-to-agent commerce is overcoming the hurdle of your KYC,
Yeah.
because this time we're talking about knowing your agents rather than knowing your customers.
KYA,
right?
yeah.
KYA.
Very
Right.
good.
So I think those are that's how I imagine in the next 3 to 5 years, and that's just payments. There
Yeah.
are many other things. Underwriting. Imagine that underwriting will be done by agents, and only a human in the loop. A human is coming in to review the decisions that are done by the agent based on specific, say, limits. That's how I imagine things are.
Right now, if you look at your industry, what's the big shift that you would really like to be involved in?
I think I would really get involved. I want to get involved in the governance space. Yeah.
Yeah.
More from my selfish reasons that I want to know what decisions are being made on my behalf.
Yes.
Yeah. That's where I want to be. And I think that's where and you ask, what should be the companies who has not started yet? What should they be focusing on? They should be focusing on building their governance around AI. Build their infrastructure, build your data, and build governance, right? Because once you have, I think, these three, of course, the resources, the people, etc., all of that is also taken. I would say don't make change management an afterthought, right? But if you want to get started, these are things that you want to get started with.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have an infrastructure that can support this kind of use cases. You should have your data. Otherwise, there's no such thing as AI AI strategy without a proper data supporting that. I always say that your platform and your pipe should be rich enough to enable your strategy. And the governance has to be really tight. Every nation now is releasing guidance on how to manage model risks, etc. There's the SC42, which is really building the standards around AI. And I imagine it, at least in the next 12 months, more regulations that are, I would say, enforced. They need to be enforced. They need to be compliant. They will start releasing this. Even Singapore, Singapore is at the forefront of all these things, right? We've gone ahead in releasing a lot of the frameworks, and I think in the next 12 months, they will be releasing things that you need to comply.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even Vietnam,
Yeah.
actually, they have released a law that is highly aligned to EU Act.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to be
Excellent.
involved. And I think everyone should be more aware of the governance around AI, the guardrails. Because if we are aware, then we'll be more comfortable to use it.